at the forefront of politics.
Our enemy is Trump. He is the enemy. We got to unite. If we're not a united party, we lose to Trump.
On the front lines of activism.
There's certain fights, if we don't engage, they win. This is a fundamental question of who we are.
And delivering your daily dose of comedy.
Donald Trump, when he had his physical, they had his blood pressure, and mine is higher than his. Oh. And the irony is mine is higher because of him.
From the blue wave.
We flipped enough seats to take control of the House. We control the House.
To 2020 and beyond. This is the Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Progress, Channel 127.
And welcome to Dean Obeidallah Show. We're live right here Monday, August 5th. I'm Dean Obeidallah, hoping to be your MBFF. And you know what, folks? In these times, we all need a BFF of all different types, all different backgrounds. It's certainly a trying, heartbreaking, frustrating weekend. And the games that we see being played by some on politics on the right are just off the charts, from blaming video games to literally Al-Qaeda, ISIS on one right-wing talk thing. It's irresponsible, and it makes us all less safe. So obviously today we're going to spend a great deal talking about the shooting, what went on, but also we have different voices on to contribute to this conversation. We'll have Congressman Hank Johnson. He's not been on before. Looking forward to chat with him from Georgia. Then Chris Liu was a big part of the Obama administration, to talk about a lot what happened in terms of policy, how Trump changed the policy and made us less safe. So, and more than that. But let's talk about what we saw over the weekend. And it's heartbreaking. It's horrific. Now the death toll in El Paso is up to 22 people dead. It had been 20 this morning, now 22. 9 more killed in Dayton. Obviously, the El Paso one is the one getting all the press because it's far more than a random horrific act of violence. It is a white supremacist terrorist attack on our soil. For me, I've been writing about white supremacist terrorism for years. I've been, for what it's worth, in my articles for Daily Beast, even CNN, going on channels, talking about it over the last few years. And I think the fact that I'm Muslim made people think I was talking about the rise of it, even though I was documenting it from sources that are objective. They thought I was doing it because I'm Muslim, I'm trying to distract from ISIS, or trying to make it seem like ISIS is not as scary. And I would always say we should dedicate all our resources to eradicate ISIS and Al-Qaeda. I'm 100% on board with that. In fact, I'm more on board with it than people who are not Muslim, because when these horrific terrorists commit acts of violence in the name of Islam, in their view, it makes Americans think that's what my faith is about, and it causes a backlash to our communities. Innocent people are killed in the name of my faith. It's horrific. But here's where we are. The rest of America's woken up to what's going on. And let's be clear, Donald Trump did not pull the trigger in El Paso. Donald Trump is not legally responsible for the shooting. He's not a criminal co-conspirator. But Donald Trump is clearly morally responsible and morally culpable to a certain degree. Still, the gunman is the person who is responsible, who committed the crime. And let's not play games. But we live in a world where nothing is a vacuum. And when Donald Trump has the pulpit that he does to spew bigotry and hatred, it has an impact. Donald Trump brings people to the doorstep of violence. And it doesn't take much for those to walk through it. And what I mean by that is, if you have been concerned about an invasion of immigrants before Donald Trump, and if in your mind you look around your community and there's more brown people, or more black people, or more Muslims, or more immigrants of any background in your community, and you're worried about it, but no one's talking about it, maybe you have concerns. But when you hear Trump say things like, it's an invasion, they're coming to rape you, they're coming to kill you, they're drug dealers, they're MS-13, and I'm sure a few are good people, then it makes you get even more animated and more alarmed about what is going on. And Trump's like, there's an invasion on our border. And there's a point where you go, you know what? I got to do something to save this country. That's where Donald Trump's rhetoric plays a role in this. He's not an ISIS recruiter. An ISIS recruiter would do more, would give you the tools to commit the terrorist attack. Trump just escalates the concerns people have and makes it to the point where they feel like, I've got to take that step through the doorway into violence. So legally, this 21-year-old gunman, I don't even want to say his name, is criminally responsible. But there's simply no disputing Donald Trump has created a toxic environment. This got little coverage by the press, but I wrote about it for Daily Beast yesterday. And I mentioned an article for CNN I wrote earlier, which will get published probably during the show, On the very day of the shooting in El Paso, just hours before the shooting, Donald Trump, and this is typical for Trump, retweeted an anti-immigrant white nationalist bigot. And this time it's Katie Hopkins from the UK, who he's been retweeting a lot. And he retweeted her hours before with her attacks on Muslims in the UK. Katie Hopkins has tweeted in the past that the migrants coming to Europe are cockroaches. And she said, quote, instead of sending gunships to stop migrants, instead of sending rescue ships to greet the migrants, I would send gunships. That's the person Donald Trump retweeted hours before El Paso. Now, she didn't tweet that exact thing on that day, but in the past she has. She's also in the past promoted American white nationalists like Jared Taylor. She is also such a traitor in race and hatred. She's banned from South Africa, the country, for spreading racial divide and racial hatred. And I'm far from the only one in the media now and of our 2020 candidates who have called Donald Trump out for who he is. In fact, I'll play just a couple of these. Here's Beto O'Rourke from yesterday, clip number 1, please.
We've got to acknowledge the hatred, the open racism that we're seeing. There's an environment of it in the United States. We see it on Fox News. We see it on the internet. But we also see it from our commander-in-chief. And he is encouraging this. He doesn't just tolerate it. He encourages it. Calling Mexican immigrants rapists and criminals, warning of an invasion at our border, seeking to ban all people of one religion. Folks are responding to this. It doesn't just offend us. It encourages the kind of violence that we're seeing, including in my hometown of El Paso yesterday.
The strong words from Beto O'Rourke. But in the time of Trump, there's no place for timidity. You must have moral clarity. You cannot play games because lives are at stake. This is not a debate over policy. This is about life and death for many communities, including my community, the Muslim community. The sense of fear in my communities is ratcheting up that someone like they did in El Paso or in the Tree of Life synagogue a few months ago is going to walk into a mosque and kill us while we're praying, or at a community center. Brown communities, black communities, LGBT communities, Jewish Americans all have to be concerned because we've all been the target of violence, sometimes by Trump supporters and others just by those who are spewing the same rhetoric as Donald Trump. These are the stakes. This is not politics anymore. This is life and death. Here's Cory Booker yesterday. Here's clip number 2.
I just want to speak with moral clarity right now because I worry that we're having conversations that don't just focus on an understanding that we are all responsible to each other in this country. We have moral bonds and fabric of our country. We have a president of the United States who is particularly responsible. I, in my faith, have this idea that you reap what you sow, and he is sowing seeds of hatred in our country, and this harvest of hate violence that we're seeing right now lies at his feet. When you have the president from the highest moral office in our land talking about invasions and infestations and shithole countries, the kind of things that come out of his mouth that so harm the moral fabric of our nation, he is responsible. He's responsible when he has taken no action whatsoever to even condemn white supremacy, even when his own FBI is talking about this being sourcing major parts of our problem. So we have a president who is responsible, who is not taking that responsibility and is doing nothing to address the deepening crisis in our country of this kind of violence.
Donald Trump didn't pull the trigger in El Paso, but Donald Trump bears responsibility for the horrific white supremacist terrorist attack. And you know, as Cory Booker just said, as Beto O'Rourke, as Julian Castro, and the list goes on to remind us of something we don't need to be reminded of, but we have no choice to confront because the man in the White House is the one doing it. He began his campaign. He came down an escalator here in New York City in June 2015 and began by demonizing Mexicans as saying Mexico is sending rapists, which is just an outright lie. But if you're like this gunman who went to El Paso and you hear that, you become more concerned. Donald Trump has talked about invasion. In March, Donald Trump said, people hate the word invasion, but that's what it is. That was in March. And he talked about 75,000 immigrants at our border trying to come in. People hate the word invasion, but that's what it is. Donald Trump, just a few weeks ago, talked about send them back, send them back. And his crowd cheered, send her back. as he went and first said it was wrong and then defended them for chanting "Send her back." The El Paso terrorist manifesto sounds like a Trump speech when it comes to immigration. Some of it does not, but the part about immigration does, where he begins his manifesto talking, first praising the Christchurch mosque terrorists, the white supremacists there, who killed people in the mosque, Muslims who were praying. And in that manifesto, the man talks about a coming white genocide and that white people will be replaced by brown and black people, especially brown. That's what the guy in El Paso praised from the Christchurch terrorist. And then he went on, the El Paso gunman, and talked about an invasion, exact words, an invasion of Texas by Hispanic immigrants. And then shared his desire to, quote, send them back. He called them invaders. This is Trump. Now, did this guy hate immigrants before Trump? I don't know. He's only 21. Maybe, maybe not. Did Trump make him aware of this threat and then gin up the fear and stoke their hate? The same way an ISIS recruiter online would speak to someone who's a young Muslim who's lost his way and tell him, the West hates you. You got to go do something about it. Now, the difference is the ISIS recruiter tells you to do something about it. Trump just keeps ginning you up. He takes you to the doorstep of violence, knowing legally he is not responsible if you take that next step. Others have heard Donald Trump's hate-filled language and acted. I've written about all of them. Last year, 3 men in Kansas were convicted, sentenced to 30 years to life. For what? For plotting to kill Somali Muslims in Kansas. And one of the 3, and they were Trump supporters, self-professed, literally quoted Donald Trump's debunked tale about General John Pershing in the Philippines dipping bullets in pig's blood before shooting the Muslim insurgents. The MAGA bomber, who today was just sentenced to 20 years in prison, his lawyer, in making a plea for leniency, said that his client was radicalized by Donald Trump and Fox News. He talked about his client, the MAGA bomber's challenges, and said, in a world of struggles, quote, in this darkness, Mr. Sayoc, that's his name, found light in Donald J. Trump. And the list goes on and on and on. No, Trump didn't direct these people to commit acts of terror. He did not tell them where to buy the weapons or the targets to attack. But he told them their fears of brown people, of black people, of Muslims was right and justified. And then he told them it was worse than you ever thought. Because only I can save you. And here's the truth I'm telling you. They're coming to rape you and kill you. That's how Donald Trump is morally culpable. Sometimes people don't get it because he's saying bad things. He is playing on people's fears and telling them that you've got to do something about it. Dylan Roofs, 2015 white supremacist killer who went to the Mother Emanuel Church, in his manifesto said, if no one's going to do something about it, I have to. Well, that's exactly what's going on with these other people that Donald Trump has brought to the doorstep of violence and let them walk through. And then you've got to be aware of some. I'm not going to overwhelm people with statistics. Here's just one very important one. Last year, according to the Anti-Defamation League, there were 50 Americans killed on U.S. soil by extremists. How many by ISIS-related? 0. How many by right-wing related terrorists? 50 out of the 50. 50. That is the most deaths on U.S. soil by right-wing terrorists since 1995. And you might say, what happened then? That's when Timothy McVeigh blew up the Oklahoma City Federal Building. That's where we're heading. That's where we're going. You cannot be more clear. And I tell you this again, not to scare you, but to prepare you. What is in front of us? The signs are here. You know, today Donald Trump read words off a teleprompter. It's meaningless. Because earlier in the day, he tweeted, in his own words, blaming the media for the attack. Blaming the media for ripping people apart. Then he reads a thing on a teleprompter and people applaud. Calls for unity. You know what? And also he went on to, we'll talk about it later, blame video games and mental illness, which is despicable. People who have mental illness are 10 times more likely to be the victim of violence than the average person. They don't commit it. They commit at the same level everyone else. They are 10 times more likely. And where does that statistic come from? Donald Trump's administration's own mentalgovernment.gov website, mentalhealth.gov website. Donald Trump has called for unity before. He called for unity in November when a white supremacist terrorist went into the Tree of Life synagogue and murdered 11 Jewish Americans who were praying. He called for unity. In February, in the State of the Union, saying we must come together. We can bridge old divisions, heal old wounds, his exact words, build new coalitions, forge new solutions, unlock the promise of America. In February, he said that. Great stuff. What did he do since February? Well, in March is when he made the comment about an invasion. Then he went on to do the sender back attack and the racist attack on Congressman Cummings and black communities and neighborhoods. That's who Donald Trump is. So what he said today means nothing. It was a charade. He deserves an Emmy Award for not laughing while talking about fighting bigotry and racism. He said the words white supremacy, big deal. He said the words white supremacy in Charlottesville 2 years ago next week. He did say it. He did denounce it when he was reading off the teleprompter. The minute he got off the teleprompter, that's when he said there were good people on both sides. Very fine people on both sides. The real Trump is the guy off the teleprompter. The real Trump is the one on the Twitter account. The real Trump is the guy before handlers and focus groups who came down an escalator and said Mexico is sending rapists, who's called for a ban of all Muslims coming to this country, who's demonized black people, brown people, and used power of the office to implement policy to discriminate against transgender Americans who want to serve in our military, who want to go to a homeless shelter. Because they're the most vulnerable of the vulnerable. They're homeless and transgender American. And Trump has rolled back the regulations to allow these homeless shelters to discriminate against transgender Americans and still get federal funding. No one is safe unless you're a white, evangelical, conservative, Christian male who's straight. And even then, I'm not sure if you're safe, but at least you're not going to be targeted. The rest of us were targeted. And the sinister truth, and here's the most sinister part of all, folks. These white supremacists, and I'm not saying Trump, I'll be responsible here. I'm not saying Trump wants this. The white supremacists do want this. They are hoping after the attack on Saturday that some people of color respond by attacking random white people in this country. Because that'll lead to the race war that Dylan Roof has dreamed of. That will lead to the race war that so many of them dream of. And again, I'm not saying Trump wants that. We know Trump wants violence. Does he want a race war? I'm not prepared to say that today, but I do know he wants violence because he called for it in 2016. A president's greatest power is not legislation or executive orders. The president's greatest power in this country is setting a tone. They can set a good tone, a bad tone, or an ugly. In Trump's case, he has set a grotesquely ugly tone that has resulted in the accolades of white supremacists like David Duke, who has said, you are a traitor to your heritage, meaning race, if you don't support Donald Trump. A man who's gotten the accolades of Andrew England from the Daily Stormer, over 100 articles praising him during the campaign. That's the same guys on the website who came after me to kill me for going after Donald Trump. This is who Donald, and the sender back quotes just 2 weeks ago with that chant, white supremacists, the ADL documented, praise that as well. That's who loves Trump. We can't play games. Donald Trump is a racist. He's a white supremacist. What are we going to do about it? That's the question. Our only thing in the face to do is November 3rd, 2020. But we need the House of Representatives to come back in session and begin impeachment inquiry and keep this guy on the defensive every single day he's in the White House. Because every day he has moments to think about going on the offensive. It'll be racism and bigotry, and more Americans will die. That's the stark truth. That's the reality of where we live right now. So we're going to take a break. We're going to come back, take some calls. We have Congressman Hank Johnson, but he's calling in from a meeting, so he's only going to be with us for a few minutes. Looking forward to chatting with him. Never had him on the show. We'll take a lot of calls. Chris Liu and Jamira Burley will be with us, but I want to hear from you. What do you think? Did you believe anything Trump said today? Or if you want to say, look, I'm glad he took about white supremacy and we're going to dedicate resources, I'm fine. You want to discuss that. But what do you really think is going on? Where are we heading as a country? How concerned are you about the future for yourself and your family, your grandchildren in this country, especially if you're of color? Because I know I'm concerned. 866-997-4748. Give me a call. Be right back.
The Dean Obeidallah Show.
My slogan for Trump in 2020, Trump for prison 2020.
Sirius XM Progress.